The following talk is offered freely to ensure that no one is ever denied access to these practices and to these teachings. If you feel inspired to make a donation to support this offering, you can go to my website at jonathanfoust.com. While you're there, you can also sign up for a monthly newsletter designed to support you in your practice. Thank you, and enjoy.
So a scientist goes into a pharmacy and says to the pharmacist, "Could you give me some prepared tablets of acetylsalicylic acid?" And the pharmacist says, "You mean aspirin?" And the scientist slaps his forehead and said, "That's it. I can never remember the name." I mauled the pronunciation, I know. But I'd like to talk about remembering, which is a big part of meditation and spiritual practice. Kind of the art of remembering what's most important. Because, of course, we just get lost in the trance of life. We get lost in the busyness of life. We're constantly reacting to what's occurring. So when we can remember to pause, in that moment we can wake up again. And that's what the practice is all about. Moving from being lost in the cognitive world and coming back to the aliveness of here and now. Or we can open to what Deepak Chopra calls so beautifully the field of infinite possibility. So the question is, how do you do that? And how can you do that in small moments when you're living a busy life? So I'd like to talk a little bit about the difference in practices for monastics and what are called householders, people who are living in the world. To talk a little bit about the power of pausing and a little bit about the concept of the minimum effective dose. What's the smallest amount you can do that gives you the biggest bang for the buck? And the importance of rituals, building in, customizing rituals in your life that will help you to pause and to slow down. So a few weeks ago, we had Shoban Richard Faulds, a friend from the ashram, who has done a lot of very deep monastic practices, extended, deep practices, and is now working on a translation of Swami Kripala's work, who some very strong distinctions about what are the practices you do when you're in the monastery and what are the practices you do when you've got a life with commitments and responsibilities and so forth. I had the good fortune of living in spiritual community for a couple decades and was able to kind of do the deeper practices of, intensive purification through the body, through physical posture, and through diet, and through breathing techniques, and meditation techniques, and inquiry techniques. And it was all pretty wild to do such deep dives. But at the same time, even though many, many hours a day were dedicated to really doing the inner practices, we also worked 6.5 days a week as a way to engage into life. And it's a rare thing to be able to meditate in a cave for extended periods of time because we're tribal. We need other people in order to survive. And it's interesting how when folks will say to me, I just want to go live in a monastery. I want to go live in an ashram and just really go inward. They don't realize that they're living in a community that has to survive together. And so when you're living in a spiritual community, unless you've got a cave where people are delivering food to your door, it's actually very interactive. And it's also with really quirky people who also want to be left alone. So it's a real challenge. So for anyone, it's about finding balance. How do you balance the inner practices with skillfully living in the world? And many different spiritual traditions talk about building in a lifestyle that's really dialed in for what you most want. Observances that will help you to cultivate what you want, and restraints, things you don't do that will help you to stay focused on what's most important in your life. So I'm just back from a 7-day retreat, and I'm just blown away by what happens when you step away. We had about 110 people for 7 days, and for the participants, no reading, no writing, no speaking, no eye contact, just sitting practices, walking practices, movement, mindful meals. And as you can imagine, your full-time job when you're on retreat, there are people who are cooking for you, cleaning up after you, who are concerned about your welfare. Your job full-time is to relax and pay attention. And of course, we talk about the line between what you're aware of and what you're not aware of in your life. As you relax and pay attention, that line moves. So there are tremendous insights that people were having over the course of that week. Lots of periods of sort of sustained, non-ordinary states where you're very, very deeply present without distraction. But the practice is not just about retreating from the world. We did have to spend time so what now when you go back? How are you going to re-engage in your life? And so many people had a real sense of clarity on returning. Now I'm more aware of all the things that distract me and drain my energy. Now I'm more aware of the things that really bring me alive, can really help you to fine-tune what's most supportive in your life. So it's really, really helpful to take a week or so away and completely pause. But it doesn't have to take long to make that shift from being lost in cognitive awareness and being fully present in the here and now. So just a short reflection, a little 2-minute reflection. If you would, you can close your eyes. And as you draw your attention inside, just feel these parts of the body. Just feel them as intimately as you can from the inside. Feel the tongue. And you may notice if you relax your tongue and feel. Let it fill the lower jaw. Feel the volume of your lips. If you bring your attention to the space between your navel and your spine and you relax, what do you feel right now? What do you notice? If you soften your palms and relax your thumbs and fingers, is there any subtle shift inside? If you feel the soles of your feet, can you locate some new sensations you hadn't noticed a moment ago? And just feel the imprint of about 90 seconds of calling your attention inside. Then if you like, you can deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes, or if you prefer, you can keep them closed. So that little reflection was about 90 seconds. And you may have felt some kind of a shift, more of a sense of presence in the here and now. It doesn't take that long. And so this is a practice of remembering. When you're doing the breath-based practice, when the breath is the anchor, in Pali that's referred to as anapanasati. It's like remembering the breath. So the word sati is critical in the practice. It's the remembering that wakes you out of the trance and brings you back to the here and now. And of course, we forget all the time. We forget that life is impermanent and your days on this life are not guaranteed. We forget that emotions are just weather systems coming through. We forget that we're not our thoughts. We forget that life is more than just avoiding failure, pain, shame, and blame. And we forget that life is more than just the never-ending pursuit of success and winning and fame and fortune. When you remember, you're home. And then the dust can settle in the moment. And then you can identify what's actually happening and how to relate to it. The two questions of mindfulness, which are repeated somewhat ad nauseum here perhaps. What is happening right now? And can I be with this? Those two questions are part of calling yourself back, refreshing a sense of how you're engaging in your life. So different spiritual traditions have got different advice for you. Some of them say, avoid the world at all costs. If you don't have any relationships, you'll never have relationship problems. So there's that whole thing of, just don't engage. There are other traditions that say, we'll take long periods to step back and then very carefully re-engage with awareness. Then there are some traditions that say, just build in short breaks through the day. Some traditions don't focus so much on longer, like 1 or 2 long meditations during the day, but their emphasis is on small pauses. Lama Suryadas, a wonderful teacher, I think he's from New York, one of the suburbs. He says when it comes to meditation, you want to do quickies, not prolongies. So the question is, if you can't live in a monastery, how do you design your life so you can be as awake to your life as you can? There's a principle in yoga philosophy that talks of the jivan mukti. The word jivan mukti is one who is fully engaged in life with all of the commitments and all the chaos that goes with it, but also has an unbroken connection to presence. That's a pretty high standard. So the question becomes, how do we pause? How do you step back from how frenetic life can be? So I had the chance to practice in a particular way. I got some feedback on my behavior, how I show up for some people. It wasn't very pleasant to hear, but it was helpful. I'm naturally a really introverted person. I think of myself as an introvert with decent social skills. I love being here, for example, and being with you. But then I go back to my life in the woods and kind of recover. Like many introverts, I need recharging after engaging. So when I show up, it's quite often in the role of teaching. I also get really enthusiastic about whatever I'm into. And I have a love of like design and technology and art and stuff like that. And I also have a real love of just design and objects. And so I'm always finding interesting things. My friend Michael always jokes that I've got something new. I'll be like, look, it's a pen, but it turns into an umbrella. And I have a number of friends over the years, they've complained that when I start talking about something I'm really into, they end up buying it. I could do a whole Dharma talk on the Instant Pot and how it can change your life. Anyone that comes to my house ends up buying at least one. But I can also come across as being the teacher, being authoritarian. And so I kind of got that feedback, being dominating. And I was really kind of horrified, a little ashamed that that's how I show up sometimes for some people. So I decided to build in a pause before I speak. And there's a great acronym, which I've shared before, called WAIT, W-A-I-T, which stands for, Why Am I Talking? So I engaged into wait. And I didn't succeed all the time. So on this last retreat, in a conversation with the other teachers, there are 4 teachers that guide this retreat, I caught myself going on and on about a private interview I had with one of the students that went really, really well. It's not a bad thing to celebrate a really powerful moment, but I realized there was something in that conversation that was about letting them know how great I am. I was embarrassed to catch that, but I was glad that I caught it. Another time I realized that I was waiting for someone to finish talking so I could tell my story. Have you ever noticed that? Another time I noticed I was about to make a comment which I thought was funny and insightful and witty, but then I realized it may have been perceived as a little bit of a put-down. It was horrendous, this practice of pausing. I realized how much of my speech was about, on some level, not all the time, but on some level, some form of self-aggrandizing. And it all came from the pause, from an intentional pause. So it's an interesting inquiry. Ram Dass tells the story of way back when. Ram Dass was one who famously said, whenever you think you're enlightened, go home for the holidays. We were talking how like going on a silent retreat, not speaking for 7 days, that's a piece of cake. Go home for 7 days with family. There's growth. There's real growth. But he told the story about at Thanksgiving, at the dinner table, his brother, who's always in competition with his brother, and his brother said something like, well, it looks like meditation isn't growing your hair back. And he said he watched that comment coming at him like an arrow. There's something about, again, the power of the pause, of just seeing it coming at him and sort of seeing all the conditioning behind it. That it was funny, it was witty, and it was a put down. It was sort of like a smile and a stab at the same time. And so by pausing, he was able to deflect it. He said, yeah, that's true. We're all getting older. And the difference that pause created was it stopped an escalating war and helped to cultivate a greater sense of harmony. So pausing can be enormously helpful. And those 2 questions can be enormously helpful. To pause and ask, what's my experience right now? And it might be, I'm angry, or I'm hurt, or I'm wanting something and I'm not getting it. seeing that clearly in a pause. And then asking yourself the second question, can I be with it? Can I make room for this? It's a little bit of an oversimplification, but a lot of brain science is saying now that an emotion, a pure emotion, lasts about 90 seconds. Of course, it's much more complex than that. But if you find yourself caught on a wave of anger or irritation or judgment or blame, and you can stay with a pure experience with that emotion, you can ride that wave in about 1.5 minutes. And it's the pausing that opens up the gap between the stimulus and the response. It's the difference between striking back and pausing and acknowledging what you're feeling, acknowledging the situation, and then choosing how you want to respond. So we'll try another little pause right now. If you like, you can close your eyes. Here's another little 90-second brainwave shift experience. So take in a long, deep breath, and then exhale. Now inhale slowly to the count of 4. Hold the breath to the count of 4. And exhale to the count of 4. Then again, inhale to the count of 4. Hold for the count of 4. Exhale to the count of 4. And then one more round on your own. And then again, relax and feel. And just sense what may have shifted in just 3 rounds of conscious breath. And again, if you like, you can open your eyes. So the remembering. I once set my beeper watch to go off on the hour. And my practice was to take one slow breath when the beeper went off. Mostly, it was profoundly irritating. But actually, a number of times, I would stop and I would breathe, and I just feel that little bit of shift. The really good news now is if anyone's beeper watch goes off, I'm now conditioned. I'll stop and I'll take a breath, and I get all the benefit out of it. Actually, the Apple Watch has a reminder that actually gives you haptic feedback for doing the coherent breathing. So you get a little buzz to inhale and time your exhalations. So technology is helping us in some ways. So when you're living an active life, you only have so much time and energy. You only have so many life energy units per day. And the question is, how do you use those? So there's an interesting concept called the minimum effective dose. Like, what is the smallest amount that's going to give you the biggest return? And it was coined by the guy who created the Nautilus fitness machines, Arthur Jones. And the writer Tim Ferriss popularized it in his book, The 4-Hour Body. So what's the smallest dose that gives you the best outcome? So in workouts, for example, you want to work with a minimum effective load, after which adding more weight doesn't produce any particular result. So noticing the little things you can do that make a difference. So I was doing a little research on what are the small things you can do that really add up in your life. Here's a little factoid. The average American spends $11.14 twice a week for lunch, according to Visa, who would know these things. If you were to skip lunch out twice a week, and put that $1,043 each year into an investment account earning 6%, 30 years later, that's $88,000. So packing lunch twice a week, that's a pretty good return over the course of your working life. It's also interesting in exercise. How long if you really focus, what is the maximum amount you can get in the smallest amount of time? The high-intensity workouts are really, really quite interesting. That if you sort of push yourself to the limit just a few times, you can get in a full aerobic workout in 20 minutes. So it's an interesting thing to look in terms of habits. And how when we set goals, how it can be very helpful to evaluate the goals that you set for yourself. I have this tendency toward never-ending, constant self-improvement. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. It's not a bad trait. I like learning. I like developing mastery in different areas. But the shadow side of that is I'm always kind of discontent, and I'm always setting goals that are unrealistically high. Have you noticed that for yourself, that your to-do list is always a little bit more than what is realistically achievable? So I always will set goals. So then I heard about the minimum effective dose. I would set a goal for writing 1,000 words a day. And I would fall short. And by day 3, I was way behind. And I would just get disappointed. Maybe you've done that at times when you think, okay, I'm going to sit for 30 minutes a day. You do it the first day, you skip the second day, the third day you realize you're already an hour behind, you'll never get caught up, and you drop it. You just forget it. I've shared before with my little line, but I'll just share it again, how I wake up in the morning and the first thought I have is, I should do yoga, which is followed immediately by the second thought, which is, I hate yoga. But if I make myself do it, about 1 minute into it, I'm thinking, I love yoga. I should do this more often. So I reframed my goals. So now I write every day. I don't have a limit as to how much I have to write. I play music every day. 1 note is okay. And I have had a number of times when I'll be lying down in bed and I'll go like, oh no. And I'll get up and I'll go to my office, I'll play 1 note on my bamboo flute and I'll go back to bed. In terms of yoga, I have determined I can do 7 minutes of yoga a day. That doesn't feel like it's too much. But when I do that every day, I get benefit from it. And sometimes, sometimes I do more. I have a little habit that I've sort of built in, a little yoga flow that I do before I go to bed every night, no matter what. And it's really, really simple. But there are a few things that are challenging in that flow. And when I first started that a couple years ago, there was no way I could do that posture. And now it just comes. But it takes like 2 minutes. So it can be very, very helpful to look at what is it that you want to do that you're not doing. And there's a way that you could shift your goals around it and explore the minimum effective dose. In terms of meditation, are you better off meditating for 30 minutes in the morning? Or would you be better off with a few 5-minute pauses scattered throughout the day, for example? So it's a question that you might consider. In terms of meditation, what would you say is the minimum effective dose? There's something that we call assume the position in meditation, where the commitment is to assume the position. As my wife says, I meditate every day, no matter what. I just don't time how long that is. But it creates a habit, which can be really helpful. So psychologically, like lowering your standards and exploring that minimum effective dose can be really helpful. It can really open up creativity in your practice again. But a big part of this is around building in rituals into your day. Just small rituals that will help you to kind of reset. I was raised a Quaker. So we had a moment of silence before every meal in my family. And I actually liked it. It was calming. No one was telling me what to do. I kind of got to do my own thing. I came up with my own little attunement. And it's kind of a traditional thing for Quakers. They have a, silence rather than a guided prayer. And there's an old joke that goes back of a traveling salesman who was going from farm to farm in kind of Quaker country, and someone asked him what it was like. He said, well, I was at this Quaker farm earlier today, and they invited me to stay for lunch, and boy, there's long, awkward pause, but I started telling jokes and got them going. So we all have rituals, and the question is, can we make them more conscious? I was once, when I was living in Niger in West Africa, taking a bus ride across the country, one of the most unpleasant claustrophobic experiences of my life. But thank God we stopped to pray 5 times a day. It was a Muslim country. And there was something so powerful, really quite riveting, of the bus stopping and everyone getting out and everyone having their prayer rugs and just taking that time just to attune and take the pause. I was so touched by how much that was a part of the culture, where everyone stopped and took that pause. So the question becomes, what are the rituals that you might explore building into your life? There's a great little TED Talk by Admiral McRaven, who is an admiral in charge of the Navy SEALs, who gave a talk called Change the World by Making Your Bed. And he talked about how the ritual of making your bed first thing, what it does for you psychologically. You have a sense of accomplishment and a sense of order, and how that begins just to put in place an organized day, or a sense of organization into your day. Benjamin Franklin had two rituals that he explored. In the morning, he would contemplate the question, what good will I do today? And in the evening, he would reflect, what good did I do today? And again, what a powerful ritual. It doesn't take long. You're just reflecting, what is my intent today? How successful was I at the end of the day? And so it's an interesting question and I forget all the time, but writing this talk kind of helped me remember of that pause before eating. That was part of my culture. If I were to do that, what would it be like just to stop and really pause before engaging into a meal? I know some people who, they light a candle before they have a meal, just as a way of sort of ritualizing the moment. And there's a great story from James Barres. This is on YouTube. I'll see if I can include the link. It's a great story about his mother. His mother gave a little talk called "My Son Ruined My Life." If you're not familiar with it, she was quite a complainer. And so she was always complaining. And James's sister would live with her and took care of her, but then she had to leave. So James came down from San Francisco to stay with his mother for, I think, like 3 weeks. So her mother would she'd be incessantly complaining. And he said, hey, let's do a game. Every time you complain, it's okay if you can complain, but at the end, can you just add these words, and I'm so blessed. And for some reason, she was kind of into it. And so she would sort of habitually, complain, and he'd look at her and say, and she'd say, and I'm so blessed. But as time went on, her heart began to shift. And she really began to realize how blessed she really was. So when James's sister came back and he went back to San Francisco, his sister called her and he said, "What did you do to Mom?" And she gave this beautiful talk of how just building in that little ritual, again, a pause and a ritual, dramatically shifted a habit for her, just to really sense how blessed she really was. So finding the small rituals. And one of the nice things I find with the breathe in 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, you can do it in a meeting and no one will ever know the difference. Oftentimes people have a ritual of just touching the heart. Just touch the heart and breathe. That having that little anchor can be a way of just drawing the attention back inside. So let's close with a short little reflection. And as you close the eyes and as you deepen the breath, and as you reflect on the busyness of your life, all of the demands, all of your relationships, and just to sense what your life might be like if you were to build in a pause from time to time. It might even be that question, why am I talking? And just notice. From time to time to pause and ask, what exactly is my experience right now? And can I be with this? Can I make room for this? If you were to build in a ritual or two that would help you to remember, what might that look like for you? And we'll close with this reading that speaks so beautifully of the power of calling your attention back, a poem from Dana Falls called Walk Slowly. It only takes a reminder to breathe, a moment to be still. And just like that, something in me settles and softens and makes space for imperfection. The harsh voice of judgment drops to a whisper, and I remember again that life isn't a relay race, that we will all cross the finish line, that waking up to life is what we were born for. As many times as I forget, catch myself charging forward without even knowing where I'm going, that many times I can make the choice to stop, to breathe and be, and walk slowly into the mystery. And as you're ready, you can deepen your breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So in a few minutes, we will engage into one of our rituals known as cookies. I saw the cart going just a little bit ago. Before then, just a few quick announcements. Just a reminder, there's great yoga at 6:30. Tonight, Tara's going to be leading the mindful discussion group. Thank you for doing that. It's in the board meeting that way. On the 19th of this month, I'm going to be leading a day-long retreat. It's called The Still Small Voice Within, exploring the relationship between meditation and intuition. It's a really cool day-long to really explore how can you cultivate a greater sense of intuition, and how does meditation tie into it? So that's pretty juicy. I look forward to that one. Thank you as always for your support for the class and for me. If you'd like to be on the mailing list, you can sign up in the back. And may you have wonderful pauses through this next week. Thank you so much.